He rolled down the window, then he tried to reach out. He wanted to know how deep he was buried, and as soon as he did, a lot of mud flowed into the car through the cracks. The man was so scared that he rolled up the window. Before he could catch his breath, the sunroof above his head began to break again. In a panic, he picked up the tape to try and fix the broken glass, but the tape couldn't hold the weight of the dirt. He saw that he was going to be buried alive. Suddenly, he saw a car alarm lock at his feet. The man picks it up and pulls it off, and stuck it diagonally above the sunroof. Thankfully, it worked. The sunroof did not continue to burst. It also stopped the soil from sinking. The man was safe for the moment. He dared to relax. The man's mouth was dry with fatigue. He picked up the mineral water beside him. Without thinking, he drank it. He didn't realize until the water was gone. This is the only bottle of water in the car, but it was too late for him to regret. It's better to drink it all in one go. At that moment, he finally remembered that he had a cell phone, so he quickly called for help, but he couldn't get a signal buried in the sand. He had no choice but to try to start the car. He tried to force his way out of the sand. Soon as the engine rumbled twice, his naive idea was defeated. The man was devastated. He went crazy and punched the car, and triggered a landslide. The car shakes violently. The man's eyes widened in horror, and never dared to make another move. Luckily, calmness returned within a few moments. The man's heart finally relaxes. Then he began to count the supplies in the car, hoping to find a tool to save himself. But after a long time, he couldn't find anything useful. But then, just then, there was a ticking sound behind us. Muddy water seeped in through the cracks in the skylight. The man hurriedly put his face up, sucking frantically with his mouth. But that wasn't enough. He used a nail clipper to widen the gap. He pulled out a bank card, folded it into the shape of a funnel, and inserted it into the empty bottle. Then he stuck it in the lock of the car, watching the muddy water accumulate in the bottle. The man clapped his hands happily, and marveled at the brilliance of his design. But it didn't last long. The man felt a little out of breath. The oxygen in the car is getting less and less. In this airtight environment, it won't take long for the man to die of suffocation. But just then, he looked at the folding chair in his hand. He had a solution in mind. He pulled out the steel pipe from the chair, and stuck it through the hole in the skylight. He tried to stick the pipe out of the ground, but just as he got halfway in, and the rain ran down the pipe, the man screamed and pulled the pipe out, and quickly plugged the hole with newspaper. He was at his wit's end. He saw a mineral water bottle, and suddenly had a brainwave. He took it and unscrewed the cap. He dug a small hole in the center. Then he got some twine and put it through the cap. He tied a knot in it, and finally, he put it through the cap of a steel pipe, just enough to cover the mouth of the pipe. After all this work, the men were impressed by their own ingenuity. Then he gripped the pipe tightly. He pushed it upwards carefully, for fear of breaking the skylight. However, he didn't see any light when the first pipe went in. He could only use tape to connect the second pipe. He continued to stab upwards, followed by a third one. Due to the lack of oxygen in the car, the man was having a hard time breathing. He was almost out of energy. Then he took out a jack and put it under the pipe. With the help of the tool, it was much more efficient. But what he didn't realize was, the jack was at its limit. The pipe hadn't even penetrated the soil, but it was the only way he could think of to survive. The man didn't want to give up, so he got a blanket and put it over his shoulders. Then he puts his shoulder to the end of the pipe. He roared and pushed up as hard as he could. Suddenly, he felt no more resistance on his shoulders. The man slowly bends over and breathes heavily. He couldn't believe he'd done it. He quickly found a wire and inserted it into the pipe to open the cap. Then he put his face close to the pipe. He looked up with anticipation.